Hello, my name is Dinos Aristidou, and I was the artistic director of the New Writing South Hear Us Out project, which started in October 2018 and culminated this June. This was a verbatim theatre project located in and working with participants in the Southeast, but it was part of a nationwide Celebrating Age initiative, which was run by the Arts Council of England and the Bearing Foundation. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you the process of creating the verbatim pieces and the methodology and approach we used to collecting, telling, performing, and celebrating real-life stories and histories of older LGBTQ people in the Southeast. The Hear Us Out project, due to the pandemic, was due initially to be a live theatre performance, but ended up culminating in a series of digital theatre pieces, monologues, and sharing of creative writing. And I'm going to really talk about the way that the verbatim theatre approach that we took in terms of sharing real life stories emerged and developed and became what we now kind of refer to as the Hear Us Out technique, though it was in many ways influenced by the work of Aleki Blythe and what's known as headphone theatre. The starting point for this festival was very much both celebration and visibility. For many of us older LGBTQ plus people, the journey to the moment of feeling able to tell our story has often been one of struggle and challenge. And we felt that this needed to be recognized and celebrated alongside all the joyful stories that we also had of our adventures and connections. Many of us were born in a time of silence, oppression, and invisibility. So it's important to be heard and the story of these histories shared and celebrated. There's also another sort of invisibility that comes with getting older, especially for many LGBTQ plus people. So this project was also about providing opportunities for older LGBTQ plus people through theatre to become visible. Visibility really is not only just about being seen, but it's also about being heard. So the very fact that this story is being told and listened to became a cause for celebration. There were really three principles to the whole project. One was this idea of celebrating who I am, this idea of here I am, and these are the stories that have led me and brought me to this moment. The second is, this is my story. And the project really was also about giving people the opportunity, not only to tell their story, but also to find different ways of shaping it and choosing as well which story they wanted to tell. And the last one really is, who might I be, with this idea that through this process, the participants were really gaining new skills, new artistic skills, and developing both as artists and as storytellers. We were quite sensitive to not making this feel like a reminiscence project, because we wanted really to convey that we are more than our memories, and that we're not just vessels that contain memories of the past, but we also have ideas and hopes for a future. We began by convening a group of about 18 people that became what we called the festival group. And this was a number of individuals as well as representatives of a number of LGBTQ plus organizations in the Southeast. And the idea of this festival group was very much that they worked with me as artistic director to shape the project. And the project had 5 processes. The first one was the actual collection of stories. The second was bringing together different people through advertising, through New Writing South, to listen to stories and to respond to stories, to have conversations and discussions about the stories. The next element really was about responding to the story. This was in a creative way. And then the final two stages really were creating the pieces that we were going to be sharing, and also the performance of them in the form of a piece of theatre, which became a piece of digital performance really in the end. We also had a smaller subgroup which was made up of various people who had particular expertise in journalism, oral history, storytelling. And the idea there was really to work with them to develop a kind of a code of conduct for the project, and to look at ethics and responsibilities regarding the use and the telling of stories. We worked together as a group, and the first thing we did was we identified a number of different themes that the stories might be about. And these were the themes that were selected in terms of the types of stories that we would be collecting. There was a very particular method towards the story gathering. Rather than an interview process, we decided that the way we would proceed was through prompts. This was very important in terms of not really setting up a situation where we were particularly interviewing someone, but rather giving them the space to tell their story in an uninterrupted way. So what this involved was having a conversation with people who were interested in telling their stories, and using a number of different prompts, so that they would be able to have a kind of a starting point that would launch the story. The uninterrupted story would then be audio recorded, either on the phone or face-to-face or in person, by the story gatherer. All the information regarding the stories and the prompts were sent to the storytellers in advance. In this way, that gave them the time really to, I suppose in inverted commas, cognitively, or in many cases, actually rehearse the story, so that the story that was told once they met with the story gatherer was one that had already been, I suppose in many ways, curated and organized by the storyteller. We also, in the second iteration of Hear Us Out, actually shared particular strategies on ways of telling your own story. Again, looking at how a story is crafted and allowing you, the participant, to have full agency in terms of the story you wanted to tell. We made it very clear that the stories that were being shared were going to be used in a theatre production. And we had a very lengthy consent form on which there were all the various options regarding how the story might be used. When we actually used particular monologues, which were edited, we sent those back to the participants and got their full permission if any edits had been made in their full monologue before these were used. But there was a very strong sense that this was for a theatrical piece. We collected approximately about 30 stories, each which ranged from 3 to 4 minutes to 20 minutes, even though there had been a kind of a guideline given regarding the amount of time that each story would be. And once we collected the stories, we then ran across the Southeast a number of story listening sessions. This is where people came together, not necessarily people involved in the first stages of the project. People came together and listened to the stories, and then we would have facilitated discussions and conversations about the stories, what the storyteller was saying. These were through audio, and these were wonderful and very joyful kind of facilitated workshops, in effect, where we just sat and talked and listened to stories and ate cake. And through the story listening process, I, as artistic director, began to, I suppose, see what the common threads were in the stories, also where they differed, and to begin also to get a sense of how the real life stories were having an impact and a response from other people, story listeners. The next process really involved engaging participants. Again, these were advertised through New Writing South. Our target audience was always older LGBTQ plus people, but it was open to people of all ages. And this next kind of set of workshops were creative responses to the stories. So in these instances, we would play an audio, and then there would be a number of creative tasks. So for example, you would listen to an audio, you would identify a character that was mentioned by the storyteller within the audio, and then you would write a fictional monologue for that particular character. Or you might listen to one of the stories on audio and again respond with a poem. And what we ended up with was a whole collection of creative responses, which in themselves were then curated into a digital performance with sometimes the writer themselves performing their own writing, in other instances, performers performing the writing of someone else. So this was really the various elements of the process before we came to put together the final piece. So the final piece really was a full-length play. It was about an hour, which was called Hear Us Out. And we were about to begin the process of rehearsal for this when the pandemic hit. And so in effect, we moved into a situation where the entire piece was put together digitally through Zoom, in effect, or through any other kind of form of platform where participants felt comfortable. It was really interesting because we started initially with 8 performers who were going to be performing the entire piece, which made up of the real life stories, but put together in such a way that each piece was in fact in dialogue with another piece. And that was really the whole basis of putting together that final script. It was finding the common threads, and the story that the final piece told was the journey using a moth as the kind of the fictional character that ran through the stories, the story of the journey from silence and not being able to find the right words to the moment of celebration and visibility. As I said, using a queer moth as the thread that ran through the whole thing. And this involved in the final production animation. The technique we used as the Hear Us Out technique, as I mentioned earlier, that originated from headphone theatre and the work of Aleki Blythe, was where the audio, the actual story, is being told through headphones. So the performer wears headphones and they simply repeat exactly what they are hearing. This includes the words, the pauses, the hesitations, the laughter, and anything else that is happening in the audio. There is a rehearsal process, so the performer goes through a process much like any other theatrical process. They receive the audio rather than a text, and then working with me, we analyze the audio through deep listening and decide on how this might be performed, where it might be set, what costume that particular voice is wearing, what props there are, what the setting would be. Because it was digital and everyone was in lockdown, people's own environments became the play space as well as the performance space. So people used their own props, people kind of used their own costumes, and it was kind of created in that way. Through this technique, there's a very interesting process that happens, because in effect, the idea is to authentically deliver the story that you're hearing through your headphones. And in effect, there is a strange combination between the actual performer themselves and this connection with this voice print that in fact they have. There is a portrait, I suppose, which is purely coming from voice, and this is what you're trying to communicate to an audience. So the performer, in effect, has to find the points of connection simply through listening, and then try to deliver those to an audience. The performers have an incredible amount of agency in this instance, especially because we were rehearsing one-to-one on Zoom or filming on Zoom, because they were choosing the environment for the story to be, for the performance to be kind of presented, and they were also making other artistic choices. I'd like to now share a short kind of section from the final performance, so that you can get a sense of the performance and also the aesthetics in terms of putting the piece together. We worked with the film company My Generation, who worked very closely with me putting together the entire piece. The excerpt is about 3 minutes.
I told her I'd been to the GP. The GP had referred me to the local mental health unit. I've had the appointment, and they'd referred me to the gender identity clinic, and I've got the appointment for such and such a day. She turned and looked at me. Oh, you've done all this by yourself? Turned away. Watched some more TV.
So, well, anyway, Christine and I have been together for a few months. That can be Christine. And my daughter was at sea. So I said to Christine, I've got to tell Maggie when she comes home. If we're going to be together, I need to tell her. So Christine said, no, you don't have to tell her. I said, yes, I do have to tell her. So anyway, I'm not a great drinker. I don't drink a lot. And so anyway, I got a bottle of wine, and my daughter had gone off out. She was home on leave, and I was sitting in the kitchen on my stool there with my bottle of wine, and I think I must have drunk about half of it when she come in the back door. And so she looked at the bottle of wine and me smoking away at my fags and everything. And I said, I've got to tell you something. So she said, well, what is it? So of course, I had a little cry, obviously, and because the chances was she would have turned against me completely. And what chance did I take? Did I want to stay with Christine, or did I want to lose my daughter? So I thought, well, she's on her way in life, and now this is my time of life. So anyway, I said, I've got to tell you something. So I told her about Christine and me, and poured myself another drink, and she put her arm around me and she said, thank God for that, Mum, because I thought she was going to tell me he was an alcoholic. So anyway, you know, I was so chuffed because, you know, there was me bringing up my daughter, who was well on her way in her career to be at sea. But the chances was, if I hadn't brought her up to accept everybody, would she have turned against me?
My first boy-boy kiss, if you want to call it that, when I was probably about 25, and that was actually quite a revelation. I wasn't expecting it, I'll just put it in it. I was at a social event and someone had pulled me to the side and basically kiss me, which I was not expecting whatsoever. And the best way I can describe it, it is my knees buckled underneath me and I went, so this is what a kiss is supposed to feel like.
Out of that box, in the corner of that room, I flew. Out of the box I'd been in. I'd never seen. I thought I'd be a butterfly, emerging splendid. Instead, here I was, a plain and ordinary moth.
I hope that gives you kind of a flavor of the piece and of this wonderful kind of process where people tell their stories, and then these stories in effect travel through the ears of a performer and then are themselves channeled through that performer who kind of makes the artistic decisions and shares them with a listener. The final image, in fact, of the film is of the text that to be heard is to be loved. Thank you very much for listening. The full production is available on the Hear Us Out website, which is hearusout.live, or through New Writing South. And there you'll also find all the other pieces that we created as part of this Verbatim Festival, and also all the other incredible pieces of creative work, writing and monologues that came out of this story sharing process and experience. Thank you very much for listening.